You guys look like... What do they look like, Jimmy?
Dorks. They look like a couple of dorks.
Get those birds! Birds! Birds!
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
What? Are you kidding? We got some family here. Can you dig it? Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
You are listening to the In the Mouth of Dorkness podcast. Here are Brad, Lisa, Brian, and Darren.
Welcome to another edition of the It Modcast podcast. With me is Brian Young.
God, I love being a turtle!
The Turtle Dork.
Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
And also joining us is Lisa Gullickson.
Quick, suck it before the venom reaches my heart.
Wife Dork.
To me, you smell like raspberries and cream. But to a witch, you smell absolutely disgusting. Like dog's droppings.
Oh. And also joining us is Brad Gullickson.
And for gosh sake, watch your language.
That's not going away anytime soon.
And Mouth Dork.
Martin, it's all psychological. You yell barracuda. Everybody says, huh? What? You yell shark. We've got a panic on our hands on the 4th of July.
And I'm your host, Darren Smith.
Warm. Warmer. Disco.
The Disco Dork. John doesn't matter. Can I get that through your head, you poor, silly, disgusting little wretch? And welcome to the It Modcast podcast.
Yay! Oh my God, I've been hearing the air. Okay, I shot a bat mitzvah last night.
Yeah.
And my God, that air horn went off like every 20 seconds.
Yes.
And I just kept thinking about that app and you guys.
Yeah.
It was hilarious. It's like that air horn is used all the time.
Did it bring a smile to your face?
It actually did.
See? Yay.
Yay.
Happiness. How was your weekend, Dork? B?
Oh, mine was actually pretty good. Didn't really get out much. So, of course, Netflix is always, my go-to. And going back to kind of like what you guys catching up from Fantastic Fest, I did another adaptation, Stephen King adaptation. I went and saw Gerald's Game.
Yes, what'd you think?
I really, really enjoyed that film. Actually, I think I have it pulled up here.
How about when that scene happens?
You know what? And I'm still thinking about it, and it is kind of like... Yeah, that's
I had my volume down.
I know.
It's supposed to be this.
Oh man, what did I just start? I love the film. I absolutely love the film. It wasn't really what I expected because watching the trailer and knowing what the film was about with her being tied to a bed and seeing the runtime of this film being like an hour and 43 minutes, I'm like, okay, how are they really going? And kind of knowing that, Bruce Greenwood, Gerald, was going to kind of die of a heart attack. How was this movie going to sustain the suspense of it?
That heart attack scene, how great was his performance in that?
Bruce Greenwood was, and going throughout the whole film, I mean, the heart attack scene was great. And just everything kind of leading up to kind of like, which I guess you would kind of say was the end of that first act, I thought was really, really good and really just kind of establishing their relationship, establishing them trying to like reconnect as a married couple, trying to find that spark physically back into their relationship, and hearing the conversations that they would have when Carla Gugino really wasn't with the whole idea of being handcuffed to the bed. But after he dies, and we really kind of get into the actual story, which is really kind of getting into her backstory. And I love like the inner monologue when you see when she starts to kind of hallucinate and Bruce Greenwood, Gerald, comes back and they're kind of just talking back and forth, and then you kind of see herself come in and those conversations, that inner monologue that she's kind of having with herself and really kind of just facing a lot of the trauma that she went through in her past.
Did you know that they were going to do it that way?
No, I had no idea.
How was your response to that?
I thought it was actually really, really cool and a different kind of different twist and a unique way of really telling the story and be able to kind of tell her story. I saw it was just a fascinating way to really tell that story.
I initially found them coming back very cheesy. Like, I found it to be like a cheesy thing, but then the story is so engaging and those actors are so amazing that you kind of like, because the out of body experience thing has been portrayed in movies before.
Yeah.
But it's done in such a way, it's just done so well that you kind of
And they
forget.
fully commit to
100%.
the gimmick.
Yeah.
And I mean, and also just going to Carla Gugino's performance, I thought you talk about it's not really a solo performance as in the way of Tom Hanks in Castaway or something like that, but she still has to go to certain places in this film and to be able to really show how she kind of panics and kind of loses her how she starts to hallucinate throughout the course of the film.
Well, she has to play every emotion, and every
the range,
persona.
The range is just incredible. And then going to the director, Mike Flanagan, just the way this film is edited, being able to kind of go back and tell the story with the eclipse and her as a child with Henry Thomas.
Oh man, freaking Elliot.
Yeah, from E.T. from E.T. fame. It was just horrific to kind of see that story kind of played out, but how that kind of plays into her character overall as an adult, where and just the metaphors with the whole thing, with the handcuffs and the shackles, and talking about the shackles that she had as a child, as to the one with her being married was for comfort. And her having to come to that realization, and just the whole idea of just how we become victims of our own secrets. This movie just speaks to so many different things. I thought it was just brilliantly done, and just the way that Mike Flanagan is also able to kind of bring in the suspense and the horror. Like, when it comes to horror movies are more than kind of just jump scares, and then just kind of being able to kind of sustain the horror of this situation, and the way he's able to kind of sustain that suspense throughout the whole film, I thought was just brilliantly done by him. And of course, the ending with the glass.
Did you keep your eyes open?
I did. It still kind of gets me, even when I think about it, because when she pulls her hand through, it looks like her skin is coming off like a glove.
It's called
Darren told me this after I saw the movie too, and it was horrible.
It's called a degloving. Like that's your
skin does that. You're just wearing your skin like a suit right now.
The listeners, what they're being deprived of in this moment is the queasy, shivering expression on Brian's face.
It was pretty horrific. I kind of saw it building up to that, especially after we go to the flashback when she cuts her hand on the glass, and I'm like, oh, okay, I see what she has to do, because I'm engaged in this the whole time. I'm like, okay, how's she going to get out of this? Okay, she's going to have to, because they talk about. I thought she was just going to cut
break
herself.
her hands
and use her blood as lubricant.
Yeah,
that's what I thought.
Use her,
really?
use her blood as lubricant to just kind of pull through. But then she slits her wrist and then cuts up, the inside of her hand.
To me, like that's the thing with handcuffs, though, because they're tantalizingly close to the size of your hand.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you always feel like you can pull your hand through. I imagine
It does, and I guess it all depends on how tightly the handcuffs were to her
and she's,
wrists.
I guess, been struggling, so I guess that would make them tighter. Right?
Yeah, because her wrists were bruised for a while. Man, but
her hands were all dead from hanging up like that.
Yeah.
Ugh, and imagine the blood rushing back to him.
Yeah.
Awful.
It kind of reminded me also of James Franco's performance in 127 Hours, and I mean that was horrific. But honestly, that movie didn't bother me too much either when he had to cut his hand off. I mean, the sound design, like the breaking of his hand, when he had to break the bone and
cut the tendon
and cut the nerve tendon, and the way Danny Boyle was able to use, like you say, the sound effects. But this movie, that moment kind of reminded me of 127 Hours in that same effect. The only thing is the ending. I'm still trying to kind of grasp my thing with the guy,
right,
the Moon Man.
Yeah, I'm still trying to kind of figure that. Now, I've never read the novel.
That's all from the book.
It's all from the book. Yeah, so I'm still trying to kind of understand, was that just kind of like a metaphor or like a manifestation? I mean, I know he was a real person, but that whole moment,
but why have that scene?
Yeah, and then the whole moment in the courtroom when she walks up to him and she's like, you're not as big or as I thought you were.
In the book, she spits in his face.
Interesting. Okay. So yeah, I didn't really know how that all kind of played out. I don't know if that necessarily worked for me in the film.
Mean, to me, that is the weakest element of the movie. I wish the film just stuck with her story of getting out of the handcuffs.
Yeah.
But the moon guy is very much a Stephen King creation.
Okay.
And it feels certainly true to the book, but is it necessary? I don't know. What I like about the ending, or I like that confrontation with him in the courtroom, and I really like the last shot of the movie. Not the, I guess we've already kind of spoiled it all. But you know what? It's been on Netflix for 2 weeks, people. Come on.
I like that last ending, too, because that goes back to the whole idea of the eclipse and her not having that light in her life, and how the eclipse kind of overshadowed. It was like this secret that was.
In that shot, you see the sun, the sun fully form. You see the eclipse finally leave.
Exactly, and to me, that was almost just kind of like a visual metaphor of everything that she kind of had been dealing with her life, with the trauma that she's been dealing with in her life, and I just thought that was beautifully done by Mike Flanagan to put that in the film. I'm not sure if that's in the book or not, but.
Well, I do like how there's this serial killer who, for her, represents death when she's completely out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And when she finally frees herself and she learns of this horrendous ghoul that's been going around robbing graves and consuming body parts and stealing jewelry and things like that, there is this extra level of not necessarily unease, but bizarreness on the second and third watches of Gerald's Game. I've watched this movie several times since it's been on Netflix.
Okay.
This and Wheelman, from our Fantastic Fest screening, I've just kind of been obsessing over these two movies.
Yeah.
And I really like how the Moon Man stuff plays on repeat.
Okay.
I still don't know if I would necessarily have written the story that way.
Okay.
But I don't know. It's interesting.
I wouldn't mind actually going back to revisit this film because I like I said, even though I do get queasy over a lot of blood and some scenes like that, outside of just kind of that stuff, I really, really love this film.
The most really uneasy sequence of the whole movie really is a flashback conversation, between father and daughter on that bed, where they put the rules together of what life is like after the eclipse.
Yeah,
that's like the queasiest, grossest
that is
sequence.
Outside of any physical, horrors as far as like with the her hand or the blood, it's really that stuff with Henry Thomas that's just like the stuff, the bedroom scene and even on the bench. That stuff is really, really difficult to kind of get through. But the performances, and I thought the film was just brilliantly done.
Don't you you watch this and you're just like, all right, Cara Gugino needs to have all the roles.
Mm-hmm.
She should be a titan of cinema.
Really should. I don't think she really got the notoriety or the roles really that.
And I think,
could have really had.
If this wasn't a Netflix movie and, we weren't currently in the political world that we are in Hollywood, you would have a lot more conversation around her performance in Gerald's Game come awards season. But because this is a Netflix movie, you're never going to hear about it in a month or two.
I was thinking about that too. I think this is probably one of the best performances I've seen this year.
Agreed.
It's just it really just blew me away. It was something I wasn't expecting out of a film like this.
I think what's at the end of the day the greatest thing about Gerald's Game is it's so many different kinds of movies, right? It is the empowerment film, it is the terror movie, it is the gross out film, it is the mystery, it's just like a total shock to watch.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's pretty much my weekend dork. Stranger Things is out. I'm on episode 6 of season 1.
Damn.
I beat you?
Yes, you did.
Yeah, Brad and I were very good. We watched all of season 1 once again. Again for me.
First time for me.
Time for Brad.
Okay.
But we
It's
have
only
not
like 8
started
episodes.
season 2.
Really?
We have
No.
not.
Are you shitting me?
No.
Because we've
God
been at the
damn
movie
it.
theater, Darren.
Oh, man. All right.
So
well,
I'm
It just came out on Friday, Darren.
it's only 9 episodes.
I know. I'm gonna finish season 1 first, but I'm gonna hopefully I want to get it done by the end of this week.
We'll do full on Stranger Things 2 spoiler cast next week.
Yay, that sounds fun.
All right, so
I'll
that
bring
means
the
I have
Eggos.
to. So I guess the next one I have to do if I'm continuing with Netflix is 1922. Is that no?
You liked it.
Did I? I dare you to go look at my letterbox.
It's fine.
It is.
It's
Is it?
fine.
Is it?
It's fine.
I hope you like mice.
Not really. I've seen the trailer.
So, like, to
I've
me,
seen the trailer. So yeah.
1922 as a Netflix movie fits perfectly well into what I thought of a Netflix film 3 months ago. But now,
Yeah, you were talking about that.
in
Yeah.
a post Gerald's Game Wheelman world, I have higher standards.
Okay.
But there are elements to 1922 that makes it a worthy watch.
Okay. Cool.
Thomas Jane is great in it. If you want to talk about performances, Thomas Jane is great. Lisa, he's great.
See, I'm looking at the other two dorks on your right and left that went to Fantastic
Oh,
Fest
Thomas
with you.
Jane is great in it, but I mean that's where it starts and stops. That's where it ends right there for me. He's got a great accent. He reminds me of Jim Varney did this he had this special way back in the early 80s called My Family Album where he went through the history of Ernest and Ernest's descendants and shit like that. And he had this one segment called The Meanest Man on Earth. And it was J.P. Worrell or somebody like that. And it was Jim Varney playing one of his great-great-great-grandfathers or uncles. And he talked like how Thomas Jane talked in 1922, except a little bit more exaggerated. And that fucker was the meanest man on the earth. And it was just hilarious. Every time he's speaking in 1922, I just kind of giggle to myself inside and think, R.I.P. Jim Varney.
I always think that it's a damn shame in a movie where one actor puts a ton of effort into their accent, their regional accent, and then nobody else bothers. So nobody else has the regional accent of the region that they are so desperate to get out of. I'm like, if you spent your whole life here, how come you don't talk like you're from there?
I just want to point out, I've gone to Letterboxd. I've looked at the ratings of 1922. Darren gave it 3 stars, which means he liked it.
Okay.
I gave it 3 stars, which means I liked it.
Okay.
And Lisa gave it 2.5 stars, which means meh.
Yeah.
2.5. Okay.
Yeah, but do you really want to have a meh? Don't you kind of resent a meh? Have you taken the time to watch a film?
I think Brian needs to decide for himself.
Oh, yeah. I'm not saying don't
sure.
watch it. I'm just saying don't go in expecting Gerald's game.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that's true.
No. I mean, I'm like I said, I want to hide from Wheelman and Gerald's
So
game,
be careful going into 1922 then, because it will blow your high. I don't. But you know what? You may very well like it.
Possibly
love it.
You never know. Like I said,
Our
Stranger
other
things have
friends,
happened.
Ryan and Emily, really liked it. Emily gave it 3.5 stars on Letterboxd, and Ryan gave it 4 stars.
See?
Oh. Okay.
See? All right. That's it for your weekend dork?
Yes.
I love it. Walking Dead, huh? Lisa, how was your weekend dork?
Of course.
My weekend dork was absolutely lovely.
Yay!
I'm sloshing around because I've drank 6 cups of tea because Brad and I went to the Alamo Drafthouse afternoon tea of the witches. So now they're doing, you know how they do those dinners, those multi-course dinners? Yeah. Well, now on Sundays, once a month, they're doing afternoon tea. This month it was the witches, and then next month I'm super stoked. It's going to be Crimson Peak. In honor of their Novembre del Toro.
Still haven't seen
month.
that movie.
Oh, this is the perfect opportunity. We can watch it together and then come record an episode.
When is it? Sunday?
Next Sunday. No.
Not next Sunday. Some Sunday next month.
Sunday.
Okay.
You can Google it.
All right.
But this was my first time watching The Witches because even though as a child I was a huge Roald Dahl fan, still am, and I'm still a child. And I read all of those books, and I read The Witches, but the book of The Witches scared me, and so I didn't watch the movie because I was frightened.
Yeah.
But I got to watch it for the first time today, and that movie is great. I could not believe how much fun I was having in the theater. So it's all of the best parts of Roald Dahl, the stuff where nowadays they take out of the movie, frankly. Not that I didn't see the BFG movie. People say that it's very loyal to the book, so I still need to see that.
It's boring.
Really? Did you see it?
Yeah, I saw it.
Oh.
Didn't like it.
Oh, but did you like the book?
No.
Oh, well, then that's different, because I loved that book.
No.
I remember walking home from school, because I would walk home from my local elementary school when I was a kid, and not now, because that would be weird. And I would try to, not trip, because I would be reading Roald Dahl books and walking.
Aww.
And I remember, one of the bully kids, while I was reading it, yelled at me, "Sophie!" And I was like, "Oh, he's making fun of me." And I'm like, wait, that means he's read this book, because he knows of the main character in the BFG. But we're talking The Witches. So the story of The Witches is, okay, so it's got all of the beautiful, dark humor of the Roald Dahl books. And so it starts with this kid, he's staying with his grandma, who's telling him all about what, real witches are like. And while he's staying with her, and he loves the stories because they're creepy, but he doesn't really believe them. And then his parents back in America die of a mysterious accident, and now he is living with his grandmother, and then his grandmother goes unconscious, and it turns out she's in diabetic shock, and his grandmother has diabetes, so she needs to go on a strict diet, and then the doctor recommends a trip to the beach, like a nice holiday. So they go on this holiday, and at the hotel they're staying at, there happens to be a witches convention, and luckily this boy has been told all about what witches are like, so he recognizes them right away, and chaos and wonderfulness ensues. It's so funny. It's
so gross.
It's so gross. It's so gross. And there was some stuff that was borderline for me, borderline ooh, I don't think. I think this is yucky. For one thing, so the main witch, the Grand High Witch, is played by Angelica Houston.
Yeah.
Who is, of course, as a Wes Anderson fan, I find her to just be, and just regardless, but I love her in Wes Anderson movies. She's an absolute goddess, a beautiful woman, and an amazing actress, just a cool presence. Mm-hmm. But one of the things is, witches hate children. They really, really hate them. So every time she would talk about them, she would get kind of nauseated. So her secretary would carry around this silver bowl just in case she spewed about children. And I was just I don't like the presence of that. Luckily, our lovable and wonderful creative manager, Brian Loy at the Alamo, won loud and told me that it was VF. So I could watch comfortably. But that creeped me out. And then also, so the Grand Witch comes up with this plan to turn all of England's children into mice. By putting so all of the witches go and buy all of the local sweet shops, and then they dose the candy with this Formula 86, and just, and then they'll turn into mice. But the process of turning into mice is they'll first start having stomach pains, and then they'll start belching, and then when they belch, all of this green fog comes out of their mouths, and that was horrible. And then they kind of shrivel up and shrink, and like they're balloons that are
deflating.
Lots of squealing going on.
And that's horrible. And then they're mice, and mice are adorable. And I really enjoy the mice.
And then, the mice have the personality of the kids, right? So Luke is now a mouse, and he's running around squeaking.
With his friend Bruno. And apparently this was Jim Henson's last movie that he worked on. So he did all of the beautiful puppetry and the little tiny mouse puppets. Okay. And I assume that he designed all of the witch makeup, which is horrible and economically done because it was cute because a lot of the witches were just men in dresses. And that's a horrible witch face and it's just a dude. I'm like, that's unfair. But yeah. And all of the witches, they had to wear wigs, and they had all these horrible rashes.
My favorite character was Rowan Atkinson's manager.
Oh, yeah.
He's the hotel manager trying to keep everything together while, sleeping with the maid
he's having some
on
kind
the
of
side. And, they're never explicit about it because it is a kid's film, but they find subtle ways to acknowledge that he's, stooping her. And when they get to the climax, the plan of Luke's plan is that they're going to sneak into the kitchen, take her formula, pour it into the soup that they're going to be eating in their banquet, and all the witches will turn into mice. And they succeed in that endeavor. And, green smoke is belching forth everywhere during the climax. And everyone's shrinking down into mice. And Rowan Atkinson unleashes the staff and the kitchen crew to slaughter the mice because mice are bad for business.
The screaming guests, by the way.
So all the guests are screaming, the witches are screaming, they're turning into mice, and here's Rowan Atkinson with a bloody meat cleaver because he's been hacking his way through mice. It's horrifying and gross. And at one point, a witch
Can I tell this part? Because I love this part. This is my favorite part of the movie. When this happened, I literally, this is my week in Dork.
That's true.
I literally leapt from my seat and squealed with delight. So after the very Ratatouille-esque scene where Luke, the little ginger mouse, is running around and he goes up and he puts the poison in the soup. It turns out that the staff member making the soup is a witch herself, and she tastes the soup to make sure that it's okay. And so she gets dosed first. And so when she discovers, oh my God, the formula's in the soup, and she's a little mouse, she runs in to warn the thing, and she's screaming, wait, don't eat the soup, it's in the soup, it's in the soup. And then Angelica Houston's enormous foot goes squash, and all of this green goo squirts out. It's absolutely horrible.
I have seen this movie because that's the one image. I don't remember the movie, but that's the one image that I remember. I remember it's almost like an overhead shot, and you see the foot come down and
mouse pop.
Yeah, and I just for some reason I always see that shot, but I cannot remember the movie. So I have seen this movie.
Lisa was literally the only one in the theater who popped out of her seat and squealed with delight.
I was the same way when I saw it because that's the only thing that burns into my mind from that movie.
I was absolutely delighted by this movie. I loved it so much. Also, in the beginning of the movie, little Itmod Easter egg. There's a witch right in the beginning who tries to get Luke to come out of his tree house with squares of chocolate. She reaches into her purse and pulls out a snake. It's a creamsicle corn snake, which is the kind of snake that I have.
Yay.
It's a little bit darker with little darker spots. And if you look at its underside, it's got all kinds of dark spots. Mine isn't like that. Mine's a little bit pinker, a little less brown, I guess.
Did it have the ruby eyes, though?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know if I look close enough. I assume yes, because creamsicle corn snakes do. So I just thought that was so sweet. I was like, that's my snake! So anyway, but the tea element of this, which made it just absolutely charming. So before the movie, they brought out these little cute china teacups, white china teacups. So not the usual, when you order coffee or whatever. Yeah. And then they had all of the beautiful printed menus where if you go to my Instagram at Sidewalk Siren or Brad's Instagram, you can get a look at what they look like. These beautiful printed programs with our beautiful delights. So there were 3 kinds of tea. The first one, and then they would bring out the French presses. And the French presses, each of those has 3 of those little cups worth in there. And they, had honey and cream if you wanted to put cream and honey in your tea. So the first one was like a typical like English breakfast tea, which is my favorite. I like a black tea. And then the second was a lavender tea, which I'm not a huge fan of lavender. To me, it just tastes like, you know, Bed Bath & Beyond. Not Bed Bath & Beyond. What am I thinking of? Bath & Body Works.
Potpourri cereal.
Yeah, it's not good. And then the last one was a smoked green tea, which was delicious. I'm not like a huge green tea fan, but it was good. I liked it. But the English breakfast was my favorite. But then, of course, the best was the food. So, so I had 3 courses. This is going to be really fun to edit, or just leave it in. This is life, people. I have a cold.
Okay.
Brad had it first, and now I have it.
Thanks, Brad.
And now they're going to have it.
I already have it.
Let the circle be unbroken. Okay. So first was a bacon cheddar scone. And when they served it, it was still hot from the oven. It was delicious.
Did it have actual bacon on it? Was it bacon flavored?
Bacon in it.
Oh.
Bacon in it.
That's
Little
even
pieces
better.
of bacon.
What's a okay? I'm sorry. What's a scone?
It's like
Shut the f*** up.
Brad's mom is
Brian.
British. Brad's mom is British. Explain to him what a scone is. While I
Scone is a scone, man. It's like asking like what a cookie is. All right, like what's pizza? Pizza's pizza, man.
I mean, is it?
It's like a biscuit.
No.
It's like a yes.
It's like a scone.
No, it's like a southern biscuit, but like not the layer type of biscuit, but like the floury type of biscuit. Yeah, it's like that.
Oh my
but
God.
it often comes in a triangle.
This cheddar scone that we ate is not English. Okay.
The one we ate wasn't English.
You don't
But,
put
like,
cheddar and bacon in a scone, man. Clotted cream.
You do put clotted cream. Clotted cream is the shit. If you've not had clotted cream,
Dude.
I had not had clotted cream until Brad, and I am so.
We're gonna do like we need to like watch like an American Werewolf in London, and we'll drink like 5 pints of beer, like 6 cups of tea, and we'll have some clotted cream and scones, man.
Your mom should make the scones.
Okay.
'cause
She
she's
will.
British.
Oh, okay. So I'm sorry for asking.
Yeah, but scones, once you've discovered them, they're delightful.
Sorry, Brad.
And the way we do them in America is great because they're full of stuff. So, like, they'll generally like be cinnamon flavored or bacon flavored.
That sounds delicious.
I mean,
It's
you can
really
go
good.
across to Starbucks right now and get this cranberry orange scone.
Brady
It is
says all the
delicious.
time.
It's not a scone.
Oh.
All right, but it is pretty good.
My friend Amy Kellett, she calls them scones, and she's British.
Yeah, well, I'm American. I'm American who appreciates.
So it's like
Scone.
it's like Taco Bell is not real Mexican food.
Yes, correct.
That's the same
But
way
it's
there.
still delicious.
But
Okay.
it's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Brad's got me hooked on what are they called?
Cheesy bean and rice burritos.
So good.
Oh.
And now they have a slushy drink with popping candy in it.
What?
Oh.
Yeah,
Rocks?
with Pop Rocks in it. It's delicious. It's a
Really?
delight and a surprise
America,
to the
man.
palate. It's honest Mexican inspired popping candy slushy drink. Anyway, the second course was truffled deviled eggs. And it was served on a beautiful green salad, delicious. And then my favorite, of course, was dessert. They had warm from the oven hazelnut shortbread cookies with chocolate drizzled on. They were so good, and they were like petite, so you didn't feel guilty eating them.
I would have felt like, where the f*** is the rest of my cookies?
I think Brad probably felt like that.
I most certainly did.
This is not one of those where you're gonna go like the meals where you go and you leave and you feel absolutely stuffed.
Yeah.
And you need to be rolled out. This is like a light, like it's like 3:00 in the afternoon. It's tea. It's like an afternoon.
So you're
tea.
like, I probably should order a carnivore to go with this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
perhaps.
swing by Taco Bell and get some of that cheesy bean and rice burritos.
Yum yum yum. So I'm looking forward. I know that next month with Crimson Peak they have those little cucumber sandwiches that they serve at tea.
I've never heard of that. I'll have to have that.
Okay.
Oh, dude, that's also super English and delicious.
Oh?
But the way I like it is, the proper way is to do cucumber with butter, cucumber and
Now you get them a
cream
lot with cream cheese. In America, you get it with cream cheese, but it's delicious.
What
the
else?
first time Brad ever made me a peanut butter sandwich
man,
at
don't
his
tell the
house, he spread butter on the bread before he put the peanut butter on it, And guess what? It was delicious. They put butter on their sandwiches. Like we put mayonnaise on our sandwiches. They put butter on everything.
Interesting.
Like I'm used to like a burger with like a toasty buttered bun.
Yeah.
But like, you know, like a sandwich, you don't butter the bread, but they butter their bread with their sandwiches.
Okay.
Interesting.
It's nuts. Anyway, so yes, that was my weekend dork. I also saw Jigsaw. I also saw, what was that other one we saw, sweetie?
The Howling 2.
Suburbicon.
Yes, Suburbicon. Ooh, I wanted
sorry.
to talk about Suburbicon. Suburbicon is discussable. And then, then we saw.
Is that good or bad?
I think good. I don't know. I'm still processing. I'm still processing. It's weird. It's a weird movie to watch after watching the trailer for Downsizing. Because I had not watched any of the trailers to Suburbicon, so I had no idea what I was watching. But it's a Coen Brothers script, directed by George Clooney.
Yeah,
so it
feels like
has
Coen
that
Brothers.
like the beginning of that movie has like that 50s gloss. And at the beginning of the movie, I was thinking, is this real 50s or is this like some kind of like sci-fi 50s something gonna happen? Like, is something else gonna happen that says like this is not actually the 50s but some kind of
They
twisted?
don't really answer it.
They don't really answer that. So like tonally, it's very Coen Brothers. Tonally, it's very bizarre, and it's one of those like slow burns. Like it kind of reminded me of like Killing of a Sacred Deer, but not that weird, weird, but that where you're just like watching a movie and you're kind of slowly tolerating it getting weirder and weirder and weirder, and then it has this larger overarching metaphor that is, I thought, very effective, but also very weird and hard to watch. But I think definitely an interesting movie in the best terms. Not like I'm saying it's interesting and that's a backhanded diss. Like it's interesting.
Yeah, it's
like,
not a Brian interesting.
Yeah, it's like an actually. It's actually interesting.
I sincerely find things interesting. I find people's opinions interesting. I find movies interesting.
I don't know if that says so much about the thing, except for like Brian is a curious person and he's engaged.
I'm just saying when I go like, Brian, what did you think of Blade Runner, the final cut? He goes, it was interesting. I go like, I know what that means, Brian.
No,
Brian trying to dodge that controversy.
No, I said I liked the movie.
Yeah, that wasn't a good example, Brian.
Okay,
I just couldn't come up
You
with
know
it.
what Brad's talking about, Brian.
Actually, I don't. I really don't.
But yes.
Okay, so I will check out Suburbicon this week.
I think it'll be fun when, like, because Brad and I have seen it,
Yes.
and Brad and I have discussed it. I think it'll be more interesting the more people watch it, just so that we have, like, a multiple directions.
Because it is
convo.
getting trashed out there in the critical landscape.
Review-wise? Or
Yeah,
just box office?
review-wise. I don't think anyone's going to go see this movie.
No.
And I don't think it's worthy of the trashing that it is getting. It's not a perfect movie. It's not a movie you come out of and going like, that's in my top 10. But there's stuff to talk about.
Oscar Isaacs is in it for, like, a second, and he's great.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I heard he had issues with him being part of the top billing because it's like I'm not in the movie that much. So why are you?
What a humble gentleman.
Yeah.
Because he's the kind of, I don't care how long he's on the screen. I want to see. I want to see him on the screen.
I love Oscar.
Me
You
too.
got your movie pass yet?
I actually just purchased it yesterday.
Oh, so you'll be
Yay,
getting
so
some-
I'll be getting it in the mail.
No, it should come in like a week and a half.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to wait until the rush died down, but I literally just purchased it yesterday. So
Can I
I'm
get
waiting.
my iPhone 8 now?
Oh my God. I don't want to talk. Okay, yes, you can.
Can I have a weekend door?
Let Brad go. Let Brad go.
We'll talk, Lisa.
Yay, I'm so excited.
Brad, how was your weekend, Dork?
I'm unemployed.
Yay!
After 11 years living the retail thug life, I am done.
Let's toast to that. Ladies and gentlemen, Brad has procured us some rum from the future.
Not
It's not rum.
What is it?
It's Johnny Walker Black.
Johnny Walker
And
Black.
it's a very special Johnny Walker Black label. It's the director's cut, inspired by Blade Runner 2049. It's the most beautiful box I've ever seen. And I do want to read you the back because it is just so delightfully silly. It's long, so, sit down, get yourself a cup of tea or your own Johnny Walker Black.
Or scones.
Yeah, or scones. Here we go. Johnny Walker Black Label, the director's cut. In the year 2049, the past has been erased. There are no records, no histories, no traditions, only recollections. The tradition of Johnny Walker master blenders dates back to 1820 in an unbroken chain of artistry and craftsmanship. It's due to their collective memory that the iconic flavor of Johnny Walker can still be tasted in 2049. Created by master blender Jim Beveridge in collaboration with visionary director Denis Villeneuve, Black Label, the director's cut, combines clouds of neo-noir smoke with a gentle glow of neon sweetness. Sublime sparks of otherworldly fruit emerge from undercurrents of pepper. From the shadowy depths, something profoundly delicate is revealed. Whatever the century, whatever the universe, Johnny Walker's commitment to the spirit of human progress endures. Keep walking.
And it tastes like it is the fuel used to power the spinners in the film.
If you let your ice melt into it a little bit, it's not so harsh.
Oh, okay.
You can clearly tell I've had more than I should.
You've had a little bit, and Darren's been drinking it like Holly Berry at Comic-Con.
Hey.
But yeah, so I'm unemployed.
Yay.
And the first thing I did was go out and buy a $100 bottle of liquor.
That's what you do.
Yes.
That's just what you do.
To celebrate.
This will be our sustenance.
It technically wasn't $100. It was $90. Don't worry.
Oh, okay.
I'm still employed.
This
I'm
is-
bringing home the bacon.
This is the cheap
The
stuff.
bacon.
You're
scones.
now my sugar mama, Lisa, and you've got to carry me at least through the holidays.
This is
So you
not
had a
what
lot
I
of free
signed
time
up
to watch
for.
movies then, right?
I sure do, and I'm getting that movie pass, and I'm going to be living at the movie theater.
Yes, sir. And read comics?
And reading comics, I got to catch up on like a month's worth. The last single issue I read was like September. Not including, oh my gosh, we can't even talk about it right now. We're not emotionally ready. But the final issue of Dan Slott and Mike Allred's Silver Surfer came out, and it is so devastatingly beautiful and absolutely perfect.
Honestly, Dawn Greenwood is my favorite character that's been created in a long, long time. I love her so sincerely, and the relationship with Silver Surfer is just so poignant, and they wrap it up into this perfect bow. It's just so awesome.
And what you realize is that the Allred Slott run of Silver Surfer is really the story of Don Greenwood, and it's beautiful. So if you have not read that comic yet, it's now done. It's 5 trade paperbacks. 4 of them are available currently. The 5th one comes out in the middle of November. I highly, highly recommend it.
As do I.
And the reason we're not talking about it is because it's just too emotional right now. Lisa can't process it all.
It.
But yeah, okay. The thing I want to dive into is something that's been alluded to already. But on Friday, Lisa, Darren, and myself all went out to the Lincoln Theater in D.C. on U Street and saw a live podcast recording of How Did This Get Made? As part of the Benson Ball. And, outside of It Modcast, How Did This Get Made is my favorite podcast. I listen to it every week. Usually they pick some really trashy, terrible film. They recently did Virtuosity, and it's a wonderful episode with Sarah Silverman.
I like that movie.
I do too, but man, that movie is weird. Okay, and like when they get into Virtuosity, you're like, should I like this film? They just did Jason X also, and they tear it a new one, and I like that film too. But sometimes liking something is also knowing that it's garbage. But this live recording centered around arguably the worst movie ever made, and that is Howling 2, Your Sister is a Werewolf. People talk about The Room as being the all-time great bad movie, but I would say that Howling 2 is far worse and weirder and more enjoyable as a bad movie experience. And we were lucky enough that before Paul Scheer and Jason Mantzoukas and the special guests Tig Notaro and Sarah, I'm forgetting her last name.
I'll look it up.
Please do. Before they came out to talk about Howling 2, we got to see Howling 2 on the big screen.
Stephanie Allen.
Thank you. With the rowdiest, craziest crowd. And we're up in the balcony and we still had pretty good seats.
We had
But we're
great
up in
seats.
the balcony, and people are just tossing back beers, right?
Two people, like, this was stressful for me because two people left stumbling, like, because we were in the balcony, it was on an incline, and two separate people fell drunk down the stairs. So I was up there going, like, and I was also peak cold, which is really an attractive way to go out.
Spreading her cancerous disease.
I didn't know that it was going to get that bad.
You know, Howling 2, which is a sequel to a generally good 80s werewolf movie, the Joe Dante film starring D. Wallace Stone. I love that movie. Robert Picardo's transformation at the beginning of the film is so great. But Howling 2, you know, it opens with Christopher Lee floating in space and this skeleton behind him over his left shoulder, and he's doing a monologue, and I don't know what he's saying. It's straight up bananas. And then it goes into the story of Red Brown, who is the original Captain America, for all you 70s Captain America TV movie fans out there. He's the brother of D. Wallace Stone's character. But of course, they couldn't afford D. Wallace Stone for this film, so they reshoot her death at the end of that first movie, and they don't have the money for the effects. And we learn later that the producers just had access to Planet of the Apes costumes, and so the werewolves are just wearing Planet of the Apes monkey suits.
I weirdly did not notice because of all the other bullshit that was happening in this movie.
And you know, Christopher Lee comes to Red Brown to say, "Look, your sister's a werewolf. We need to put a stake through her heart because they removed the silver bullets during the autopsy, so she's going to come alive again." You're like, "Oh my, okay, so that's what this movie's going to be." And then there's this reporter friend who wants to win a Pulitzer, maybe, and expose all the werewolves in the world. And I'm thinking, well, like, in the first film, it ends with her on live TV broadcasting her transformation.
So they're kind of exposed.
Yeah,
already.
but then they retcon the fact that that wasn't actually broadcast and blah, blah, blah. Then cut to, we're going to Transylvania and we're going to hunt down the lead witch vampire lady, Sturba, played by Sybil Danning, in all her
hottie.
booby glory.
You do realize
She is a perfection.
You failed to mention the 11 times they showed that one band singing that one song.
Yeah, the punk band. Because you're in LA, it's the punk scene, and there's this, you know, I wish I had memorized the lyrics because I would sing it for you right now. But a really fancy punk song.
I dig the song.
Me too, especially by the 11th time. You're like, I think this is good.
Howling. And you learn that there's a special breed of vampires that can't die by silver. They can only die by titanium stakes.
Yeah.
And, we go to Transylvania. We're going to hunt down Sturba, and we're going to watch some orgies amongst the werewolves, in which they don't really have sex as much as lick at each other and bark and pull their tops off. Lots of boobs.
Lots of boobs.
Wolf
But,
titties.
like, they're not all, like...
Well, as
A-list
Jason
boobs.
Mantzoukas said, they're all covered in gross fur.
Yeah.
So it's hard to appreciate the boobs. And like the one glorious boob shot is repeated 17 times in the closing credits. Sybil Danning ripping her top off. They
Brian,
keep
have you
cutting to
seen
it.
this?
No.
I want to do a reaction video of me watching Brian watch
the
this
end
video.
credits?
Just the end credits of
Just the
Howling
end
2.
credits.
Oh, wow. Okay.
17 times the end credits cuts to Sybil Danning ripping her top off.
It's exquisite.
And the way they edit the credits to other characters reacting to the boobs being exposed over and over and over
So
again.
there's shots in the movie where someone in the film, totally unrelated to her breast being exposed, in a totally unrelated scene, she's not even in, and they're reacting to something. Where in the end credits, they take a collection of all these different shots of people reacting to stuff, and they show her expose her boob,
and
cut
then
to that
cut to
reaction.
the-
And
I
show
see.
her boobs, cut to this other person's reaction.
It shows a dedication and hard work ethic that is not shown in the rest of the film,
Yeah.
particularly with the editing.
Interesting.
And look,
Okay.
that's the thing. They talked about it a little bit during the podcast recording, but the editing of this movie, they only have, I don't know, 5 werewolves, and they cut back to the same shots of those werewolves in mid-transformation 100 times.
Oh, yeah.
And they cut back to it at scenes that are totally incongruous to whatever's happening on screen. So, like, someone will be, like, in the shower, cut to werewolf. Somebody will be, at the market, cut to werewolf.
They're definitely going for something.
They even cut from one establishing shot to another establishing shot in two totally different locations. They didn't even go into the place that's established in the first establishing shot. They show it, and then they cut to another establishing shot. Do you remember that?
Yes, and they do it with wipes.
Okay.
Right? So they're in love with Star Wars, obviously, and, George Lucas and all the various, side wipes, diagonal wipes, triangle wipes.
I wanted to diamonds.
Yeah, there's a diamond wipe in this movie. There's a seashell wipe.
So if you have ever used Windows Movie Maker or even iMovies or any like homebrew like video editing software, and when you go to the transition tab and how it has them all laid out, swipe from left to right, circle wipe, triangle wipe, square wipe, they selected in order probably every single one of those transition options in the editing software, and they're in the movie chronologically. It's nuts.
And, this was the perfect crowd, because this is actually the second time I've watched this movie this year, because I picked up the Blu-ray from Shout Factory.
You are nuts.
Yeah, that's right. I'm a completist when it comes to the Howling films. And I watched it at home, and I had a good time with it because it's, it's a crappy movie. I like crappy movies. But watching it with this crowd and seeing...
In a bizarre environment, too, because we watched the movie in the actual Lincoln Theater. Yeah. So, like, it's... a fancy-ish theater, and they had it done all up with, those, inflatable Halloween thingies, where they
there's
light
like a
up.
Big spider, and there's a big ghost.
Yeah, and, a baby. A
all
big
on stage.
zombie baby.
And the screen isn't huge. Yeah. They've just erected it on stage.
Yeah, it's just, it's kind of like a concert screen, I guess.
Yeah.
But it was, it was kind of cool to see it in such a weird place.
And everyone's cracking open their Heinekens, and as the film's progressing, people are getting more and more rowdy and reacting really heavily to this insanity in front of them. So that by the end, when there's a bat creature,
yes,
that Sturba has on a stick,
it aliens into the thing and then bursts out of the mouth like the priest guy.
Yeah, there's a priest, and the bat flies off of its stick.
It's like a dragon. It's like Lockheed.
And it's the most laughable puppet. And this really crappy Lockheed puppet dives forth into this priest's mouth.
It sticks its little tail in the priest's mouth.
And then you get this shot of this prosthetic head and the little tail twirling around his teeth, like... Oh, and then it bursts forth through its jaw, through the guy's jaw, and it is gross.
Yeah, it penetrates his mouth and then wiggles his tail in there, and then the tail is going in and out of the mouth. Ooh, it's effed up. Oh, but not as fun as I love when Sturba is singing her werewolf song, and the guy doesn't have his magic. You can tell that one if you want to.
They create all new werewolf mythology,
because
right?
there's not enough, frankly.
So they can't die by silver; they die by titanium. But they also have this magical howl that if you hear, you'll go crazy. So they get consecrated wax and turn it into earbuds, and so everybody has to wear these special earbuds. But this one guy's earbuds, they fall out because they're just earbuds.
And then he exclaims, "I lost my earplugs!"
And Sturba comes down, and she's like Emperor Palpatine, lightning bolts this dude in the face.
And then his eyeballs explode out of his head, and then just two joyful springs of blood just burst forth from his face. Ooh. Except for his face is made out of clay. Because the budget is not great.
It was amazing.
And then, you have this final scene where everyone's won the day, and it's Halloween night, and this little kid rings the doorbell, and when they answer, it's a werewolf child. And it's either the best werewolf makeup a child could ever procure, or it's the worst makeup a child could ever procure. So they're trying to figure out, is it an actual werewolf child? Well, he came from across the hallway. Wait, no one lives there. That apartment's been empty for months. Well, let's go take a look. And they knock on the door, and there's this creepy dude in a priest costume with this crazy Eastern European accent. And he's like, hello? Oh, well, do you have a child here? No, I'm a bachelor. Oh, okay. Ooh, would you join me? No, you're creepy and weird. We're going to leave. Okay, bye. Join me next time. And he Peter Lorre's out of there. And that's the end of the film.
You know the guy, so going into the podcast, you know the guy in the audience who said that the priest in the apartment
Was the same guy in the beginning?
That's not true because
I know.
there's two different listings. There are two different characters in IMDb.
They're not connected at all. That dude in the audience was wrong. But the greatest thing about this night was we got to experience Jason Mantzoukas, Paul Scheer,
Tig
Notaro,
and Allison Alen.
And destroy this movie. And, you know, Darren's talked about his love of Jason Mantzoukas.
Yeah.
I share that love of Jason Mantzoukas. And Jason Mantzoukas came up in the balcony with us. And I
saw some of your photos.
He like plowed through all the beer cans that were tipped onto the stairs.
But he was disgusted by us ruffians in the balcony.
Who kept trying to touch his legs.
I didn't try to touch his legs.
I wanted
Darren
to.
had a question, and he was being
man.
very polite and raising his hand very politely. So
You
of
could
course he
not
was
be
ignored.
polite in the balcony.
I now know.
Oh,
Yeah.
so you didn't
Full
get
of
your
animals.
question?
No, it wasn't even really going to be a question. It was an observation about the
I
guy.
want to hear your observation. I
Well,
didn't get to hear it.
the guy who was lucky enough to have the three-way tryst with Sturba and their daughter,
The not Jimmy Smith's
the
guy.
not Jimmy Smith's guy, he would go on. I think this was after. I'm pretty sure this was afterwards. He would go on to play the convict in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, the guy who was on the run for cutting the tag off the mattresses, the do not remove under the penalty of law mattresses. I know. I was watching the film and I was like, I know that guy. I've seen him in something else before. So like every time they would show that guy, I would have that reoccurring thought, and then it just popped into my head. Oh shit, he was in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. So yeah, that's. I was just gonna mention it.
That was a valuable piece of information that they missed out on.
My question was gonna be, how come no one pointed that out? How come no one noticed that?
And well, here's my question, because Paul Scheer would put the microphone to an audience member and he would ask them what their adjusted subtitle would be. You know, the movie's called Howling 2, Your Sister is a Werewolf. That sister element, not very crucial, unless the sister they're talking about is Sturba, who would be sister to Christopher Lee, which might be possible. There's two brother relationships.
That actor who was in Pee-wee's Big Adventure and The Howling 2, his name is Judd Omen.
Judd Omen, yes.
Judd Omen.
Him.
What a great name. So my question to you, Darren, is what was your fake Howling 2 subtitle going to be?
Ooh.
Howling 2, Howl Harder.
Oh,
Very
that's not
nice.
bad. Lisa, did you have one?
I did not. Come back to me. You share yours, and I'll see if I can come up with one.
Mine would be Howling 2, 3 boobs. Awesome. No, I don't know. I didn't have one.
Or
I did one.
Howling 2 breasts, 2 furious.
Yeah, that's really good.
yeah,
Darren's
yay.
much better at this than me.
But I didn't get picked, so yeah, it was.
So
But it
yeah,
was cool to be there.
that's
That
my
was-
week in Dork.
That was pretty awesome.
It was surreal to be in the live audience, having listened to hundreds of episodes of that podcast, to now see it in person and be there for the visual cues, because there were a lot of visual aids. I felt like I was part of something special.
Because you were. We all were. So that episode
Can I
hopefully is
share-
going to be airing. So follow How Did This Get Made? Look them up on whatever podcast app you use and look out for that episode.
Mine would be Howling 2, Secret of the Boobs.
Yeah.
I like that.
You
I
like
like
that,
that.
B?
Uh-huh.
What would
Thank
yours be?
you.
Oh, you know, I'm not good on the spot.
Neither am I, Brian.
Neither was I.
Do it. All right, so I'm going to go into my weekend dork. And when
Howling-
you remember
Howling-
it, just blurt it out in the middle of my weekend dork.
I feel like I want to mention, so one of the regular, I'd never listened to this How Did This Get Made podcast before.
Really?
No, I had never listened to it.
Oh, shit.
I know. And we've gone to many podcast
I thought
recordings.
I thought you were the one that told me about
No,
it.
it was Brad.
Oh, okay. All right.
You're welcome.
Huh.
Yeah, the podcast where I listen to Jason Mantzoukas. He's been on Comedy Bang Bang a whole lot.
Yes.
But my favorite Jason Mantzoukas podcast was when he was on The Gilmore Guys, because he is a big-time Gilly.
Oh.
But I want to mention that so at the end of the show, they do like you are supposed to improvise or come with a prepared song about second opinions, and then they read like 5-star reviews of these movies from Amazon. But DC is so sophisticated. We had 2 improvised special opinion songs, and the second one was sung by Anna Kasbarian, who is also a graduate of the George Mason Music Program. She was an opera major with me, and she sang beautifully on the stage of the Lincoln Theater. She did her theme based on the habanera, the aria from Carmen, and so she showed up the George Mason Performing Arts vocal performance program very well, and I was exceedingly proud. And I hope that she listens to my podcast, because I also make and do cool things.
Yes,
Anna,
you do.
Please listen.
Yay!
Yay!
At the end of the episode, they were like, "Oh, so what do you got coming up?" And everyone was plugging their stuff. And then he was like, "Jason, what do you got coming up?" He was like, if you want to see me have sex with a pillow or some shit like that." He's like, "I'm on this show, Big Mouth. It's on Netflix." So yeah, last night after binging Stranger Things season 2, I found that show and found that episode, and let me tell you, it is frigging nuts. It is probably the most. So I've been on the podcast before, like Lisa said. I professed my love for Jason Mantzoukas. I talked about how he's the greatest thing in Dirty Grandpa, and that he's the funniest thing in The House, the Will Ferrell movie that he just did with Amy Poehler. So in all of these movies where he has these bit parts, to me, he's the funniest thing, because they allow him to do and say the craziest shit. And I know a lot of it is him improvising, and it's great. But his character on Big Mouth, and in this particular episode, that's probably the craziest stuff I've ever heard Jason Mantzoukas say or do. It's pretty funny. It's really absurd, and it's kind of vulgar, obscene. But that's the nature of the TV show, or it's a cartoon, just so you know. But yeah, so because he plugged that, I went and watched it, and it was funny and hilarious and shocking. But yeah, he got a pillow pregnant, and so he's a 13-year-old kid too. There's that. Anyway, and you get to see the act happen. It's nuts. Anyway, for my weekend dork, I had a pretty busy weekend dork. I saw Jigsaw.
I love the Saw franchise.
You love the Saw franchise. Did you see Jigsaw?
I did.
We did.
Do you love Jigsaw?
I thought Jigsaw was a Saw movie that I ranked as the second to worst Saw movie.
Damn, what's the worst?
Saw.
The first one?
Yeah, I don't like Saw.
You like this one better than the first Saw?
Correct.
What?
The performances in the first Saw are painful. Cary Elwes and Lee Whannell, I cannot stand their style of whatever the hell they're screaming. I love the ending of Saw.
Yeah.
I really like Danny Glover's crazy cop in Saw, but overall, I do not like that movie.
Okay.
What I'm attracted to in the Saw franchise is what most people chastise it over, is the absurd, switchbacking, convoluted narrative where Tobin Bell's Jigsaw killer, John Kramer, died off during the sequence of the third Saw movie, and yet his legacy continues over the course of those 7 films through proteges and flashbacks. And usually it's like a surprise flashback. You thought you were watching something happening today. Well, you're watching something that happened in the past. And at the very least, this current Jigsaw movie keeps that confused, backwards storytelling device active. And I like that for the most part. I know this is your weekend dork. My problem with that movie was the cops in this film are written so laughably stupid, and the conclusions that they draw are ridiculous and borderline offensive.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean,
there were some pretty good kills in it.
The final kill for me was worth the price of admission alone. earlier on in the film, like the very beginning of the film, they recovered a body, and he's got a bucket on his head, and they're trying to get the bucket off. So they use this medical laser to cut it off, and I'm like, what? There's no such thing as that.
You didn't use that? You haven't used that as a combat medic?
No. We use a scalpel, some shears, or not a laser. Anyway.
Well, Jigsaw's set like 2 years ahead of now.
Oh, okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're on the lookout for this. It's coming. So they use that, and I'm like, what? Okay, but it's a Saw movie, so whatever. And then the movie's going, and they're just throwing more ridiculous shit. So I'm like, all right, the least of my worries is this laser tool, this medical laser tool. Anyway, the end of the film, these two characters wake up and they have these collars around their neck, and they remind me of the collars that's in, I don't know which Saw film this is.
Saw 3.
Saw 3, when the girl had the shotgun collar on with the shotgun shells strung up in a ring around her neck, all pointing towards the center, pointing towards her neck. Well, these collars with these devices pointing towards the center of their neck. So the devices look like, and I was like, oh shit, are those the laser things? Turns out they are. And I'm like, okay, with the way this is rigged up, those things look like they can only move, like up and down vertically, which means if they cut on, they're going to have to all come from the outside and point in towards the center of this person's head. And I'm like, that's what they're selling me right now. If they deliver on this shit, then I want to be a happy dude. I forgive the rest of this movie. And you know what? I got what I wanted. They delivered on that shit.
That overhead shot of the flower, the head flower.
Yeah, it was good. Nuts. So when that happened, I was audible in my approval of that.
Tobin Bell is in this film, and I don't want to spoil how, but when he's in the movie, it's really great. I love his character. I love his twisted morality. I wrote the review of this film for Film School Rejects, and when I got done with it, I submitted it to Neil, the editor, and he sent me a message back because he was posting it to Rotten Tomatoes, and he said, is your review rotten or fresh? And I go, I don't know. Fresh. He's like, okay. So my review is listed as fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, which I think currently is at 50% rotten. But like these kinds of movies, sort of like with the Friday the 13th films or the Halloween movies, it's more about the total piece, right? It's more about sitting down and marathoning all of these films. And what I like about the Saw movies is that they do attempt to weave their timeline together, revealing new elements that have been working the entire time and you weren't aware of it.
Yeah.
I don't think Jigsaw succeeds. And I was kind of hoping that since it's been 7 years since the last one, since part 7, that they were going to have to do something really crazy to keep John Kramer in the world of Saw. I was sort of hoping, and again, I don't want to spoil it, but I guess, this isn't a spoil. It's a spoil that they don't go supernatural. I've had this entire idea in my head because I want to get to Saw 10 in space, Saw X, as some might call it, where the entity known as John Kramer, Jigsaw, becomes a Freddy Krueger-like demon and is worshipped across the galaxies like a cult, right? And the way that the proteges kept his Punisher, Marvel Comics Punisher-like morality in play throughout the cosmos. And this was going to be the first step to getting to space. This would be like the introduction of the Jigsaw demon.
It is not that.
That doesn't happen, guys.
Sorry.
But I will write this script, James Wan, if you're listening.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay. All right. I know some producers who might help you make that. So we'll see. So you get that done, and then I'll see what I can do. So yeah, I saw that. I also saw season 2 of Stranger Things. Apparently, we have some dorks here who have to catch up on that, so I won't go too much into that. I would say I enjoyed it much more than I did the first season. That's I'll leave it at that. Like it's really good. It's really enjoyable. I love Lucas and Dusty. Their interactions, they hang out. The group is splintered for most of the season, and I know a lot of people take issue with that because it is cool to see them together in their interactions. But I feel like what it does with them being separate is it gives them an opportunity to flesh out their own singular personalities and give them characters beyond a group dynamic so that they can bring those characters into the group dynamic to make for a stronger, dynamic when they're together. And for me, I feel it succeeds in that way. And I mean, all the way up until like the ending, I was satisfied with the ending of this one more so than the first one. So I will say that I'm happy that the season turned out the way it did. I was shocked that I don't know. Someone told me it was like 13 episodes or something like that. It's only 9. So when it went off, I was like, oh shit, that's the end. But the pacing, I didn't have an issue with as much as I did the first season. It felt balanced to me. Maybe 1 or 2 complaints there, but we'll get into that when everyone else has seen it and we do a review proper. But yeah, if you haven't seen it, catch up with it. I think you'll enjoy it. If you like the first season, I think you'll definitely enjoy the second season. What I want to talk about, I guess, really for my Week in Dork is today I came from a screening of Little Shop of Horrors. I guess they're showing it because it's Halloween. So I caught this at the AMC.
Isn't it having some kind of anniversary too? Probably.
I caught this at Tyson's, and the significant thing about this particular screening is that it is the director's cut. So it is the one that the ending of this one is different. You may or may not have heard that there was an alternate ending to the theatrical version. In which it is a dark and a more bleak ending. Mm-hmm. And I had seen a clip of this ending, but I had not watched the entire thing, and I had not watched the ending in context with the rest of the film. But before I get to the ending, I just want to talk about the film. I had the realization during the opening song, Skid Row. Matter of fact, it wasn't during the Skid Row. It was the following song after that. That this is my favorite musical because I still know the words to all the songs. I remember all the songs. I liked all the songs. They're all catchy. And the reason why I know the words to all the songs is because I've seen this movie so many times. And the reason why I've seen this movie so many times is because I enjoy the movie so much. Rick Moranis is great in it, but this time for me, for whatever reason, the character that I focused on the most, or that was the standout character for me, was Ellen Green's Audrey. Yeah, man, I'm pretty sure, like as a kid when I was younger, I loved her I loved the character, but like now, I mean, I don't even. It wasn't really just so much like the character of Audrey Green. It was Audrey. It was Ellen Green, the actor that I had fallen in love with during this watch. I mean, she is so good, going from that very talking like this in this very high pitched voice with a lisp, and to singing, like being kind of funny but then dramatic, because her character is so tragic, and then when she just transitions into song, like her voice is so good, like she sings so well. Suddenly Seymour. Oh my god! And then she brings the pain of her character and how it's written. She brings that into her vocals, and like the lyrics of all the songs. I love all the lyrics, but just in particular, like the songs that were written for her and that she sang, and just the way that she sang them. The Somewhere That's Green, during that song, like I teared up because of just the tragedy of her character, and where her character starts out in that film and then where it ends. And now, when I teared up during Somewhere That's Green, I'm thinking about where it ended in the theatrical version. Not even like how it ends in this version, which makes that performance for that song and every other song in the film, or just everything that precedes the ending of the film, even more tragic. Now, having seen this new ending, Steve Martin, his introduction, I think is still my favorite. Be a Dentist.
Oh man, I love that one.
I was singing along.
I just
during that,
I love the
entire-
I love the leg kick when he comes out of the closet and he says "old mama."
He kicks his leg up.
He's like, "Cuz how much?"
That was, and then I forgot Bill Murray has a cameo in that as the patient who just loves pain, and he was pissing Steve Martin off.
Yeah,
I was smiling from ear to ear.
I love that movie
from beginning to not to the end, because when the end happens, where it changes. Spoiler alert! I'm going to spoil the ending of the film right now. So if you haven't seen it, don't listen. Or if you don't want to know, don't listen. So the difference between this version and the director's cut is that in the final act, when Seymour decides, you know what, I'm gonna take this money, and tomorrow we're going to go get married tonight, and then tomorrow we're going to run away and live happily ever after. And then he says, she says, I'm going to go get ready, and he's like, all right, I'm going to pack my bags and I'll meet you. So he's trying to sneak out, and then Audrey 2, he confronts Audrey 2. No, while he sneaks out, Audrey 2 says, you know what, feed me before you leave. He's like, all right, I'll go down to the market and I'll get you some meat. And that's about it. So Audrey 2 says, okay. So Audrey 2 calls Audrey 1, and she comes over, and then he tries to eat her. And that's when Seymour comes back and finds her in Audrey 2's mouth, and then he pulls her out, and they have the final confrontation. The building gets pulled down because the supports get removed, and Audrey 2 is crushed, and Seymour and Audrey 1 wake up and they live happily ever after. That's the original ending. Well, in this one, when Audrey 2 calls Audrey over and he eats her, he bites her, like his teeth puncture her. Seymour still comes back and finds her in his mouth, and he removes her. But when she takes her to the back alley, her wounds are fatal, and she gives him. She has some dialogue when she remarks that Audrey 2 said the most peculiar thing. He said that, I'm going to eat you, and you're going to be in here with Oren and the owner of the shop. And that's when Seymour confesses to her that, yeah, I did that. I fed them to Audrey 2. And so she says, well, I'm going to die soon. So when I die, feed me to Audrey 2 so he can grow bigger, because when you did that, he grew bigger, you became successful, and you've been happy. So when I die, feed me to him so he can grow bigger, and I'll be a part of him. So in that way, I'll always be with you. And she sings a little bit of, I can't remember if it was Somewhere That's Green or Suddenly Seymour, but she sings like a bar of that before dying. And her performance in that part, and she's got like tears in her eyes, but she's not crying, like crying. She's just, I don't know. She says she's content in that moment. Man, it was so heartbreaking, and her performance was so good. And then the Seymour proceeds to take her in there and put her in Audrey 2's mouth. Yeah. And the way that he puts her in there, and then she like fades into he swallows her slowly. Mm-hmm. Like, it's kind of messed up that he did that. Like, man, I understand, like, maybe he's fulfilling her last wish, but still, like, don't feed her to him. But he did it. But the way that he did it and the way that they shot it was almost like beautiful. How like she just like her hand was like the last thing to go in, and he reached out for it. Anyway, Seymour was going to go commit suicide, jump off the roof, but then he changed his mind. He goes in. Audrey 2 ends up swallowing Seymour in like this long, protracted, drawn out, like slow shot. Like, it wasn't even in slow motion. He just swallowed him up, and then like the Audrey 2 gets marketed and sold around the country, and then people start feeding it blood, and then there's this frenzy, and then all of a sudden it turns into like this 5-minute like giant kaiju movie. It's like the Biollante. Like it's freaking nuts. But the way that it was shot, like, they put a lot of time and a lot of money into that end sequence. And it wasn't just a shot of a giant Audrey, like, coming down the street, smashing a building, and then that's it. I mean, it was drawn out. I mean, there were multiple shots of multiple Audreys. One was on a suspension bridge, like a giant Audrey on a suspension bridge. There were 2 of them coming down the street. There was another one off in the distance somewhere fighting the military. Like, it was elaborate. It was epic. And it was shocking, to be quite honest, because if you look at the rest of the film that comes before that, the movie without that alternate ending is about like these people who live in Skid Row, and they want out, they want better, and Seymour is a simple guy. He works in this flower shop. He feels he's at a dead end place, employment wise, and also with his living situation, just in society. And this flower comes into his life and offers him a taste of happiness. It brings him closer to his coworker who he sees in this abusive relationship with Steve Martin, and there's some happiness there, and he feels like, all right, well, if I can get Audrey 2 to bring me this fame and this money, I can get enough money to make Audrey 1 happy, and we can maybe get out of here. I can get out of this environment in this situation. So you feel like, all right, well, this is an underdog guy, a guy who has nothing, who, he deserves some happiness. And at the end of the movie, the theatrical version, he gets that. But at the end of this alternate cut, like, both of them die. And then after they die, you have another 5 to 10 minutes of the rest of the world dying. Like the final shot of the movie is of the Statue of Liberty. There's like an Audrey on one shoulder and another one, Audrey 2 on one shoulder, and another one coming over like the crown. And Tisha Campbell, Ticino Arnold, and the other girl, I don't know her name, and they're singing a new song that I have never heard before. But that goes with the ending. That plays over the entire ending of the film, and about I can't make out the words, but it's something about don't feed the plants, and it ends on the shot of the Statue of Liberty being engulfed by these giant plants, and it says the end ? Exclamation point, question mark, exclamation point. And it's a really bleak ending to an otherwise, or what used to be, like a really fun and upbeat film, and I kind of appreciate it, but I don't know if I'm still biased because I've seen the theatrical version so many times. That's the version I live with. But
I prefer the original version.
I don't know. I have to see this one again.
Well, the story goes that they were doing a test screening. They were doing a test screening, and the audience was loving it, exploding into applause throughout the movie until Rick and Ellen died, and then the place just froze over.
And I can see why. But I tell you what, when that happened, maybe a little bit before that, it felt like the movie was like an anti-drug movie. like these people were in Skid Row, right? Not an anti-drug movie, but okay, hear me out. So these people were in Skid Row. They're in an impoverished neighborhood, and they don't have much, and they want to get out. So this plant comes, and based on this plant, they gain notoriety and popularity and start making money. But in order to keep this plant alive, they have to kill people to sustain this plant to make money. So you have to feed the beast in order to keep it alive to make this money. So then, like, it spreads, it goes, the marketing people steal it, and I'm not saying that has anything to do with it, but it spreads from out of this Skid Row to like across the country, and then other people are feeding it, and then it starts to grow, it's out of control, and then people are dying. So I was like, is he trying to make an analogy to like drug dealing and like drug use or whatever? Because you're killing people by selling this thing to them, and then but you do that to get money because you want to get out of your impoverished situation or whatever. Like, I don't know, like, it just was weird. Like, the tone of it changes sharply once Ellen Green died, even before Rick Moranis dies. Once Ellen Green dies, the tone of it changes sharply, and it made me focus on, okay, so like, what is he trying to say? And then that last song at the end, again, I can't remember the words, but I just remember thinking, like, is this an analogy? Like, what is he trying to say? So that was one of the conclusions. I was like, maybe he's trying to say that. Not to say I buy that, but that was just something that popped up in my head. But I will say this, though. The practical effect of Audrey 2 is probably one of the most underrated special effects or characters or creature designs in film. I mean, we talk about the pioneering work that Andy Serkis and Weta and ILM are doing, like with motion capture and all that, to make us feel for this thing that is a CGI computer animated entity. It's its thing, but the actors and the coupled with working with the computer artists, are able to create a living, breathing character, so we can feel for Caesar when he emotes. We can relate. We can connect. Well, there's this plastic and latex and foam and gears and servos contraption that is a living, breathing character, coupled with the voice of Levi Stubbs of the Four Tops. I mean, like, it is an amazing and astonishing cinematic achievement in that Audrey 2 is an actual living, breathing character and the centerpiece in this film. Like, just different things that they do to give it personality. Like when he pokes Seymour in the chest, like, go get it. And he make his vine, like, curl up and poke at him like that. Or just the smaller ones that come off of him, or the movement of his lips and how articulated his lips are. So when he's speaking, and it might not get, at least I know you're like you're a stickler for lip movement,
but I also
and pronunciation.
love the Muppets. So,
but even with RG2, they do it so much in a way that while it might not be 100% accurate in how lips are supposed to move and join and separate when they express certain words, they come really close. And for it to be that big of an effect, it's not like you have a smaller face where you have smaller servos and less motors and things like that. I'm pretty sure they had to have a huge puppeteer team to just animate RG2. But I was fascinated and fixated on that effect every time it was on screen, and I was only thinking about like the filmmaking behind it, and I was astonished. I was astonished. It is one of the greatest, I think, for me, one of the greatest cinematic effects / characters to be put on screen. It was amazing.
Has anybody else seen the original Roger Corman black and white?
Oh yeah, we have it.
We have it. Yeah. So I actually watched it randomly. We were staying at a beach house. Like, my parents rented a beach house, and it only had like six VHSs, and the Roger Corman Little Shop of Horrors was one of them. And this is definitely a situation where it being it later being made into a musical elevated the story, because the original black and white movie, it's supposed to be a horror comedy, but
it's interesting.
It's interesting, not very funny.
It's got
I think,
but it's not a musical.
It's not a musical.
It's got a pretty good Dick Miller turn in there. He likes his flowers.
Little Shop of Horrors,
But, yeah, it's just like a black and
perfect.
white
It's a perfect movie.
It is a perfect movie.
It is a
and
perfect movie.
It just goes to show, like, because there are exaggerated elements, there are spoof elements in it, but the music is delivered so sincerely, and the music is so exquisitely composed that really the emotion of the characters are expressed in that music, and it heightens the story.
It does. Yeah. I don't know if you were stepped away, Lisa, but I was telling them that when Ellen Green was doing that number, Somewhere That's Green,
that's a beautiful
I got
song.
teared up this time.
It's absolutely beautiful, and like things like horror musicals, they hook you by going like, this is going to be a joke. Isn't it ironic that this horror movie is also a musical? But then the music is so good, you find yourself being transformed by the music, and that the story is then, it transcends what it could originally be, the inherent emotion and all of that wonderfulness.
And then once you're connected to the characters because of that, when the stakes are raised, there's an inherent in danger because you have an investment now.
Yeah, well,
because
singing is like an intimate and weird thing, especially in musicals, because that's, when you're singing, like, you're expressing the emotion in two ways. You're getting multiple layers of what this person is thinking, because you're getting what they're thinking by what they're saying, and generally what they're saying is like a suspended moment in time, a suspended feeling, but also you get the parts of the emotion that are inexpressible, and they're expressed by the harmony, and they're expressed by the melody, and they're expressed by the orchestration.
Yeah.
And people who don't like musicals, I would say give it another go. Go, like, find someone to shepherd you into what the amazing musicals are, because there's a lot of suspension and disbelief when you go to the movies. A lot of people are like, people don't just burst out into song. I just don't buy it. But they're like, when you go to the movies, there's a lot of suspension of disbelief. And for a good story, you can suspend your disbelief and just get involved in the emotion that's being expressed in song.
Absolutely. Real quick, closing out. I have to do this because I have to keep a promise. So last week, on a whim, kind of like when I decided to join the military.
Oh no!
But this is not that drastic. I ain't going anywhere, folks. I decided, or ended up, what started out just making a phone call to get some information about IT college, information technology college, because I am the tech dork. I ended up enrolling. I got accepted after I tested in and got enrolled to an IT college. And the young lady who helped me out, the counselor, she, part of the process is they ask you a little bit about yourself. And she started giving me an overview of the school and the different places that they have campuses, and also just about IT as a career field and how it's growing, and the different cities and places that it's boom. It has experiencing a boom. And she mentioned Austin, Texas, and I'll go, oh my God, I would love to go and move to Austin, Texas, because they have a huge film community there. And she goes, oh yeah, and I said, yeah, and film is like my favorite thing. I love film. And she goes, oh, wow, me too. That's pretty cool. She's like, well, maybe send me some emails, send me some recommendations of some movies, and I'll send you some. And before the end of our conversation, like within that spiel, she asked me, so she says, have you seen, what my favorite movie is? Have you seen Night of the Hunter? And I was like, oh, no. So I'm thinking, because she said she loves movies and I love movies, her first movie is going to be a title that I've seen so we can geek out together. But her first title and her first question or recommendation was a movie that I had not seen.
I love Night of the Hunter.
I said, you know what? I have a podcast. So I'm going to, this is like our homework segment. I explained that to her. I said, you know what I'll do? I'll watch this movie. And then on our next episode, I'll review and give my thoughts. I'll talk about the movie. And she goes, okay, cool. I'm going to subscribe now. So she subscribed. So here, I'm keeping my promise, Amy. I saw Night of the Hunter. It is a 1955 film, and it is directed by Charles Lawton. And it stars Robert Mitchum as this preacher. Oh my goodness, this dude is scary. So the story is there's a woman, she has two kids, a little boy and a little girl, and her husband. I guess they had fallen on hard times or whatever. Maybe it was because of the depression. Yeah. And so he does a stick-up job to get some money because he didn't want to see his kids wandering through the woods or begging for food or scrounging for food and resources. So he steals his money, and he's being chased by the cops, and he makes his way back to the homestead before the cops get there. And he goes up to his son and his little girl, and he says, look, these people are coming, but I need you to take this. I'm going to hide this money. And you can't tell anybody, no matter what. You have to promise me, and not even your mother. And so, excuse me. So he makes them raise their right hand and take this solemn oath to never tell where this money is hidden. The cops come, they take him away, they take him to jail. He gets sentenced to hang, sentenced to execution by hanging. And while he is awaiting his sentence, in the jail cell with him is this preacher. Now, the preacher we meet earlier on in the film, and he gets brought in for car theft. He steals a car and he gets thrown in jail. So the father is in jail. He's bunkmates. He's cellmates with this preacher, and in his sleep, the father is mumbling about this hidden money, this stolen money. So the preacher tries to coax this information out of him in the whereabouts, because his plan, I guess, is to, when he gets out, he's going to go find his wife and his kids and try to get this money. And so, like, that's I'm not going to spoil the rest of the movies, but that's the movie. The preacher gets out of jail. He makes his way to this small town, to this family, and he tries to weasel his way into this family to get this money. And let me tell you, man, like, Robert Mitchum, I haven't seen him in much, but, like, the scenes where he's talking to these kids and he's trying to be real. I mean, he's talking to kids, so he's trying to talk to them. He's trying to appeal to them. But the devilishness of his nature and the greed can't help for him to just blurt out, so where'd your dad hide the money? Like, and he does it, like, repeatedly. And so the little boy from the jump is like, you know what? Something's not right with this dude. I don't like this dude. I ain't telling you shit. The little girl, though, Oh my gosh, for me, she was like where like 99% of the suspense came from. Because she's like, I happen to like him. And so she's always hanging out with him. She's shooting the shit with him. And she's very open with him. And I'm like, dude, she's going to tell him where that money is. And the whole time, like, it's right under everyone's noses. And so that's suspenseful. So the crazy part is something happens like earlier on to someone else in the family that was shocking to me. And I was not expecting that. And then, like, the movie just keeps getting crazier and crazier. So I will say this, Amy, I enjoyed this film. I will talk more about it with you at a later time to get into spoilers, but I don't want to spoil it for the viewers who haven't seen it. But this was an unexpected treat. This is something, like I mentioned to her, this is something that would, be in the homework assignment. This is something I see Brad assigning me sometime down the road, had not it been for this conversation with Amy. Yeah, it's one of those films that I would not necessarily have had on my radar, that I wouldn't have necessarily picked up and watched on my own. But now that I have, I'm glad that I did. The cinematography in it, there's some striking shots in that film that I was not expecting. And I will say this, and I mentioned this to Wife Dork before we were recording. So watching this with Little Shop of Horror, pertaining to the depiction of women in film, so we're at a place, or at least for me, I feel like as a society, we are at we're like on the precipice of what I hope is a significant change, at least regarding the conversation and about the depiction of women and the treatment of women, not only in films, but in society in general, with our current president, with, as far as in entertainment, with the Harvey Weinstein scandal and the fallout that's coming from that, and how women are being encouraged by the strength of other women who are coming forth and being their own voice for their own experiences, and for the women who are afraid to come forward or who do not wish to revisit that publicly. Like there's a discussion, and it's being led by the women. And so for me, I feel like we're at a very pivotal moment in our current history that I think 10 years, 20 years down the line, when my 7-year-old daughter is a woman and she's teaching other kids, or she's teaching her kids or her daughter, they're going to look back at this moment in history and say, something happened significant where a turn was made. Now, hopefully it's for the better. But with that in mind, because that's been the way for me, that's been society within the last couple of years, how we've been trying to get more women in lead roles and strong roles and not be victims and have equal pay and things like that. So, like, I'm watching these older films, Little Shop of Horror, and I'm looking at Ellen Green's character. And in that film, she's in an abusive relationship with Steve Martin. And if I'm not mistaken, the time period in which Little Shop of Horrors is supposed to take place is maybe like the 50s.
Yeah.
I want to say. And so, again, and this movie was made in the 80s. So I don't want to, I don't know, maybe it is partly due to the time in which that was made, but also maybe it speaks on the time in which the story takes place. So looking at like that character and the life, when she's fantasizing about somewhere that's green, and she's looking through the Home and Gardens magazine, and they show the depictions of America in the 50s and the 40s or whatever, and the home wife, and this is what happiness looks like. This is what women will aspire to, and at least this particular woman on Skid Row, for her, I guess maybe any place is better, but this is the life. But that life in that magazine, that wasn't just in this movie. That was what America was like at one point in time. And then the depiction of like Steve Martin's attitude towards her and his abusiveness, and then seeing like in Night of the Hunter, where that particular time period, it was, that woman's husband had died. So everyone in the town is telling her, and not a lot of time had passed when the preacher had come along, and everyone's telling her, well, you got 2 kids now, honey, and you're not getting any younger. You need a man. You need a man. And she meets this preacher, and within like 2 days, I think maybe, they get married. And knowing that there was a point in time when, and there's still countries where you don't know the person you're married to, but it's arranged marriage. You meet this person, this is who you're going to marry. But knowing in our own country, there was a time where you didn't have, all right, I'm on date number 3, and tonight I'm going to get the third base, and then 3 months from now, we're going to take it to the next phase, and then a year from now, maybe I'll pop the big question, or we've been dating and living together for 10 years. I'm going to ask her to marry me suddenly. That's normal now, but like back then, back in the days, there was a time where I met that guy 2 days ago. My husband died, 3 months ago, or I don't even know how long. It wasn't that long in Night of the Hunter. But anyway, I met this guy 2 days ago. Maybe you should go tell my son that we're getting married. You break the news to him. And that was just nuts to me how, and I say all that to say, like, when watching this movie and afterwards, like leaving that place, representation. We talk about representation, on screen and in cinema, and what that does for an audience. Brian has conversations about why Black Panther is such a big deal to him. Why he gets emotional looking at the audience's response to that trailer, and what that means to him, and what that means to me and my younger brother and my daughter, and what Wonder Woman means to them as representation. I don't know, for whatever reason, in my I don't know if it's my stubbornness or my stupidity, but today, it just hit me. I can't imagine what that's like as a woman, and this is how it's been since the beginning, as a woman, to sit in an audience and constantly see that, this is how you are. You're relegated to, not being able to speak unless you're told to, or when they portray you, they portray you as not having a mind and a voice of your own. The father tells the kid, I'm telling you the secret. You can't tell, not even your mother, because she's not as smart as you. And so, as a woman, to sit there and see that this is what the rest of the country is going to see and think, okay, well, I guess that's the norm. I'd rather tell a kid a secret than a grown woman, because the grown woman doesn't have sense about herself. And this isn't the only movie that portray women like that. So for me, I draw parallel to that must be what it's like for them, in how when I go to a movie and I see that a Black person, a person of color, is only relegated to certain roles, or not being enough to be this, or he's the help, or he's the first one to die in a horror movie, or he always talks in a certain slang or whatever, Ebonic. He's never T'Challa. He's never the king. He's never the hero. He's never Black Panther. We're just now getting a Black Panther film in 2017, and cinema has been around for way too long. And so I don't know. I just had this profound. I don't know. For me, it was just a profound moment where I just felt like like I said, I can't even imagine what that's like. But that's been women's reality since cinema began, just like how it's been people of color's reality since cinema began, that we're not looked at and they're not looked at as equals to their white male counterparts. And I don't know, and I apologize for going on that tangent, but it was just a thing that happened to me, after watching both of these films, seeing these two women characters being treated that way, and then it just made me think about the rest of the women characters in their depiction in cinema, in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s,
in the 70s,
and 80s, and even today, and even today, yeah. And so, which makes me go, we've come a long way, but we haven't changed all that much, and that's what's scary to me. How long does it take before you learn? And so that whole Me Too thing and the whole the movement that's happening, I hope it's not just. I hope it goes beyond the hashtag. I hope it changes so that I don't have to have these revelations, and my daughter doesn't have to have these revelations after watching movies or watching people that look like her on the screen. Because she's a woman, she's a female, and she's of color. So, it's double for her. So I don't know. I hope this change that's happening is something that becomes relevant and moving forward, that keeps the momentum and grows, so that there's a time again when women are as equals on screen and in society. So yeah, that's that happened because of Little Shop of Horror and Night of the Hunter. So thank you, Rick Moranis and Ellen Green, and also Amy for recommending that movie. I love when cinema gives me an insight into another life, another people's life that I might not necessarily have, to make me look at and contrast and question my own. I really appreciate that. And so I'm grateful for that in that discussion, even within myself. Be on the lookout for the end of this week. Oh, for Homework Cast on Wednesday, we're finally getting back to B's pick. He gave Brad Nocturama. It was a film that he caught at Lost Weekend this year. So be on the lookout for that. At the end of the week, oh my God, Brad had a wonderful idea. Wait, I don't want to give credit where credit is not due. Was it Lisa or Brad? Fistful of Coworkers?
Oh, yeah, that was mine.
All right, so Lisa came up with the idea of a fistful of coworkers because
of Thor.
Thor
Because of
Ragnarok.
guys from work.
Yes, we know
Thor
each other.
Ragnarok.
He's a friend from work. So we have a wonderful fistful coming up in honor of Taika Waititi's entry into the MCU, which I don't think anyone at this table is not extremely excited about that film.
Oh.
So that's coming up. Stay tuned. I'm going to put this nugget out there right now. We're going to hash out the details this week, but I got a hold of a couple of really cool posters, and these are nice cardstock quality posters. I got the one from the exclusive poster for Star Wars: The Last Jedi. I got a foil Thor Ragnarok poster, and I got a really cool Justice League poster. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to figure out a nice cool sweepstake giveaway type deal for our faithful listeners. So be on the lookout for that. If you want to score one of these cool posters, please stay tuned to the podcast for that. In the meantime, you can find the Turtle Dork at the Turtle Dork on Twitter, at the Turtle Dork 1 on Instagram, and at Brian William Young on Facebook. You can find Wife Dork at Sidewalk Siren on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. Mouth Dork is Brad Gullickson. You can find him on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Letterboxd, and Untapped at Mouth Dork. And I'm your host, Darren Smith, the Disco Duo.
Hold on. I thought of some more Howling 2 titles.
Do it.
How about this one? The Howling 2 First Blood Moon Part Boobs. I should have saved that one for last, because that was probably the best one. The Howling 2 Money Never Creeps.
What?
Not as good.
Oh, Money Never Sleeps?
Yeah. How about this one? The Howling 2 Furry Road.
I thought of that one too. Yes, I thought. Great minds. I appreciate that one.
What about you, Brian?
You still ain't give me one.
Howling 2 Electric Hooly Hoo.
Yay! Because that's the sound you make when you're a werewolf. Very good, Brian.
All right, I will take that. I'm your host, Darren Smith, the Disco Dork, on all social medias at the Disco Dork. That's going to do it for us. Thank you all for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week. Get ready for Thor Ragnarok. And until next time.